Robi Damelin, an Israeli Jewish woman in her 70s, and Bassam Aram, a Palestinian Muslim man in his 40s. They seemed an unlikely pair, but there they were, sitting together in a little circle of 20 chairs in a basement meeting room of our hotel in Jerusalem. An Israeli Jew and a Palestinian Muslim, clearly very good friends. We clergy from Boston shuffled in after breakfast with our coffee, by now used to the routine but very tired. It was our 9th day in Israel this summer, and that night we knew that we would be flying back to the United States after another day jammed with experiences. Our suitcases were upstairs in the lobby, all packed, being loaded onto the bus. Next, we knew we were going to the garden where some felt Jesus may have been buried. Then onto a Jewish settlement right on the border of Gaza where tensions were running high. We knew it would be dangerous. I assume many of us Boston clergy were already looking ahead past the discussion about to happen, or maybe we weren't thinking much at all, feeling utterly unable to take in more content this late in our intense travels. Whatever the cause, we were drifting in rather slowly that morning. One of the speakers, Robi Damelin, has a lively way about her, witty and with what sounds to me like a British accent, but she really grew up in South Africa. The second speaker, Bassam Aram, was more quiet. He was talking with some of our trip organizers. Robi wanted to make sure that we were all present before either she or he began, and with a rather light touch, she urged us to text our colleagues to nudge them along. If we had known what we were going to hear, no nudge would have been needed. The next hour may have been the most powerful of any I spent there. In many ways, it was about wisdom, those words we heard about read by Pat. Wisdom. Robi Damelin's son, David, was killed by a Palestinian sniper at an Israeli checkpoint. David was 28. Bassam Araman's daughter, Abir, was shot in front of her school by an Israeli soldier. She was 10. Both Robi and Bassam say that they were forever changed by their child's death. The pain never goes away. There is not a day they do not think of their child and miss him or miss her. And at any time, even years later, they can still cry. At some point in the horrific mourning period, sometimes months after their child's death, both had been visited by another parent whose child had also been killed in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And at the end of those visits, Robi in her home and Araman in his were both invited to a meeting of the Parent Circle. It's a group for parents of children killed in the conflict from both sides. Robi went, and finally she realized, I am with others who understand. I looked into the eyes of the Palestinian mothers, and I really realized we all had the same pain. At night, the tears we spill on our pillows are all the same color. Robi also realized that together, they could be the most powerful force for reconciliation were they to choose that. They have every right to hate each other, but for the sake of the kids, they won't. They don't want any other parent to ever experience their pain. So that's the commitment of those who join the Parent Circle. Robi ended up throwing herself into the work of the Parent Circle. She called it her lifeline. Using her professional skills, which were in public relations, Robi arranged interviews and speeches and seminars in schools throughout Israel. They're all given by parents and sometimes siblings of children killed. And they all speak out for reconciliation. Quote, we don't take sides. We aren't pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian. We're pro-solution. Always they go in pairs. One Israeli Jew, one Palestinian. 2 years after David was killed, Robi had another knock on her door. The sniper who had killed David and 9 others had finally been arrested, Tayyir Hamad. He had become a folk hero for some Palestinians. He had been such a good marksman as a sniper that he killed 10 and escaped undetected. The soldiers at my door, said Roby, thought I'd be happy that he'd been captured. But why? Happy that he'd be rotting for the rest of his life in prison, hating him would not bring back my son. But for 3 months I could not sleep. This whole thing, what I have gone through, she said, is a path of judgment. Seeing who you really are, not judging another, but judging myself. Am I honest? Do I really mean it when I talk about reconciliation? Can I even talk about love? Do I have the integrity with the message I bring? I was very proud of myself, Roby said. I was telling stories well when I would go to the gatherings. I was making documentaries for peace. I read poetry. I was traveling the world being such a good person. But I couldn't keep doing that work if I couldn't walk the walk. And now the man who had killed my son had been found. So after many months of wrestling, Roby wrote the sniper's parents and asked them to deliver the letter to their son, who by now had been convicted and received multiple life sentences. There is no death penalty in Israel. I wrote to them, his parents, that it was the hardest letter I'd ever written, but I'd like to meet them. I'd like to meet their son. I hope they'd see the honesty in this overture. I certainly was no saint. I was asking for the sake of other children. In a while, the parents responded, saying that they had delivered the letter to the prison. Roby waited, and 3 years later came the response. Her Palestinian friends from the parents' circle didn't want her to read the letter, but she needed to. And she's told us it wasn't exactly Martin Luther King. The young man who had killed David said, "You are crazy. I killed 10 Israelis for the sake of my country land, Palestine." Now again, Roby had to wrestle. She said, "I finally realized I did not need Tayyir's permission or approval. I had the choice. I had the right to revenge. But I chose to give it up. By choosing to give up my right to revenge, regardless of how Tayyir responded to me, I finally felt enormous freedom. I was refusing to remain a victim. I felt clean with myself." Bassam Erim spoke next. "I was born in a cave where 26 of us lived," he told us. That is the custom in some parts of Palestine, and sometimes it's required by the poverty. It was the perfect life, he went on, in our tradition. At the age of 6 or 7, I didn't understand, though, why soldiers came to my village. They spoke a language I didn't understand. They seemed to go crazy when we just held up our Palestinian flag. By the time I was 13, I began a military group with other kids my age. At first, we just wanted to torment the soldiers, throw rocks, but then we got more serious. And eventually, when I was 27, we were all arrested. I got 7 years in prison. In prison, he said, one day we could all go to a film about the Holocaust, and I knew I would enjoy seeing Nazis kill Jews because I knew the Holocaust was a big lie. Jews are not humans. But I began to cry, seeing humans treat other people that way. I began to wonder if that was why the soldiers overreacted to our stone throwing. Maybe they'd seen that Holocaust film before they came to our village. The only Israelis I knew were vicious settlers or soldiers. I thought we would always fight. But then there were the Oslo Accords, and I wondered if a peace settlement was possible. And if it was, why had I spent 7 years in jail? He cited Rumi. Rumi writes that when you are clever, you try to change the world. But now I am wise, and I try to change myself. After leaving prison, Arim decided to bring together Palestinian terrorists, as like himself, and Israeli soldiers. At our first meeting, we hated each other and knew we'd all tried our best to kill each other. After 1 year of meeting, we realized we were the same. We did these things for the same reason, to have peace in our land. And so Arim founded Combatants for Peace, using Mandela's slogan: if we want to make peace with an enemy, we need to work with the other side. Peace requires that you get to know and trust your enemy. Then at 9:30 a.m., one day, my 10-year-old daughter was shot by a soldier outside her school. We waited 4 years for the military investigation, which concluded that the case could be closed. Now, Bassam had a choice, too, about how to live after his daughter's death. In prison, he'd concluded, if I only hate my enemy, I will be killing myself. Robi spoke again. Bassam, she said, helps me have empathy for the Palestinian. Arim Bassam helps me have empathy for the Palestinian longing for one's first home. To see history through the eye of another human is what creating empathy is all about, and that's 90% of our work. Robi then told us about speaking in a high school about her son David's death. She does that often. And a Palestinian girl stood up and shouted, "Your son deserved to die." The room grew very quiet. "What do you do?" Robi asked us, the clergy. "What would you do?" "If you walk out," she said, that's the worst thing. You've confirmed each side's views that talking can never work." And I realized, said Robi, that she must be from a bereaved family. So I stood there, and after pausing for a moment, I asked her to tell me about all those she knew who had died because of the conflict. And she did. We talked, just the two of us, to one another there in front of the class. And at the end, I asked her, "What color were your tears?" And she apologized to me. That girl, said Robi, was the hero of the class. Not just because she asked for forgiveness at the end, but because of her first statement. She'd been honest. She'd engaged me. That took huge courage. Robi said, "I've been trying to learn how to talk with people in a way that leaves them with dignity. I used to come across in a way that turned off listeners. I came across as if I thought I was superior. But I've learned I have to be completely honest with myself and other people all the time." Robi and Bassam are people who are wise in the way described in both those Old and New Testament passages. They show us how to live with, quote, a gentleness born of wisdom, a gentleness born of wisdom. And for that kind of wisdom, one of its fruits is peace. Well, what is this wisdom? According to our passages, it's not really about being cunning and able to outflank others. Wisdom isn't a synonym for being erudite, the professor who says, well, you're free to disagree with me, but you'll be wrong. And it's not wisdom as if you have enlightenment. I opened my eyes and saw what I hadn't before, but, well, you're still blind, so wise up. In Robi's words, that wisdom doesn't let you leave your conversation partner with dignity. So rather than trying to outflank another, the wise one isn't competitive trying to win, but seeks peace and reconciliation, not pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian, but pro-solution. It's not easy. The wise one isn't rigid and arrogant about what is right, but rather humble and persuadable and willing, maybe even wanting to be transformed. The wise one isn't offensive, declaring their enlightenment and implying another's blindness. Wisdom instead, says Robi, makes her goal the discovery of the humanity and nobility of your enemy. The discovery of the humanity and nobility of your enemy. I don't know where you are today, in your life and your relations with others, maybe, though, between you and anyone who might feel like the opposition. At home, in the neighborhood, even here in the church, can these stories guide us? In our country today, especially with the hearing that may take place this week about the Supreme Court, can this kind of wisdom be our goal? How do we apply it? Here, once more, are the words from James, but in a different translation. Do you want to be counted wise and build a reputation for wisdom? Well, then live wisely, live humbly. It's the way you live, not the way you talk, that counts. And mean-spirited ambition, that's not wisdom. Boasting that you're wise isn't wisdom. Twisting the truth to make yourself sound wise isn't wisdom. That's more animal cunning or devilish conniving. Whenever you're trying to look better than others or get the better of others, things fall apart and everyone ends up at each other's throats. Real wisdom, God's wisdom, begins with a holy life and is characterized by getting along with others. It is gentle and persuadable, overflowing with mercy and blessings, not hot one day and cold the next, not two-faced. You can develop a healthy, robust community that lives right with God and enjoy its results only if you do the hard work of getting along with each other, treating each other with dignity and honor. Those who sow peace live in peace. May it be true. May we try that with each other. Amen.